I didn't notice the cold at first. I noticed the silence. We were camped just off Boreal Ridge Road, a little clearing tucked between tall pines and a wall of dark granite. Snow had been falling on and off all evening. The fire crackled, the wind hissed through the trees, and somewhere far up the slope, a freight train moaned its way across the old rail line. Normal Donner Pass sounds. Then, nothing. The fire went out like someone pinched the flame between two fingers. 1 second it was there, throwing sparks into the air, and the next it was just gone. No smoke, no glow. The coals didn't even sizzle. I sat up fast. Behind me, Mason swore under his breath. Leah stopped talking mid-sentence. Even Jace, who never spooked easily, went still like he was listening for something. But there was nothing to listen to. No wind, no trees shifting. No snow hitting the tarp. Just a thick, heavy silence pressing in from all sides. I grabbed the nearest flashlight, thumbed the switch. Nothing. Dead. Mason tried his. Also dead. The only light left was the faint white from the sky, buried behind clouds. And then a beam of light flickered in the tree line. A single flashlight, pale, unsteady, pointed straight at us. "Jace," I said quietly, "is that you? Did you leave one on?" He shook his head. "We don't have any spares out there," Leah whispered. The beam drifted slowly, like whoever held it was testing the weight of their arm. Then it blinked out, came back, blinked again, too smooth to be random, too slow to be a dying battery. Something moved behind the trees. I couldn't see it clearly, just the outline, low to the ground at first like a wounded animal dragging itself through the snow. The branches barely rustled as it passed. When the flashlight beam reappeared, it lit up the shape just long enough for me to see mud cracking across pale skin. It was crawling, using its hands, pulling the rest of its body behind it. My breath stopped when it reached the edge of our clearing. The thing froze, lifted its head, and slowly, too slowly, rose onto its feet, both legs bent backward at the knee. I felt the air leave my lungs. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The world narrowed to the crunch of snow under its weight and the faint shake of that stolen flashlight beam. No wind, no sound, just it. And us. I finally managed to whisper, "If none of us turned on that flashlight, who did?" And for the first time that night, the thing took a step toward the dead fire pit. I should probably explain who I am before any of this starts to make sense. My name's Luke Harlan. I'm 31. I don't have the kind of life that usually leads to stories like this. I'm not a ranger or a rescue worker or someone who goes looking for trouble deep in the woods. I fix rail lines, part-time, mostly in the foothills around Northern California, long shifts, heavy tools, cold mornings. It's quiet work, simple, predictable. I like predictable. What I don't like are tight spaces, old tunnels, collapsed shafts, anything with a ceiling low enough that you can't stand up straight. People laugh when I say that. Man, you work around trains. You're always near tunnels. Sure, but I stay outside them. I know what it feels like when the air goes thin and stale, when sound bounces back the wrong way. When you can't hear your own breath, I avoid all of that. It's not a fear so much as a boundary, and I stay on the safe side of it. That weekend was supposed to be safe. A simple camping trip with friends I've known since college. Mason Turner was the loud one, always talking, always laughing. The guy who carries 2 flashlights and still ends up losing both. Leah Brooks was the sharp one, the kind of person who notices when a tree looks too still or when the air smells off. And then there was Jace Whitman, the outdoor guy. Rock climbing, backpacking, snowshoeing, he lived for this stuff. He's the reason we picked Donner Pass in the first place. "You haven't lived," he said, "until you've seen the stars from up there." We didn't see any stars that night, but he wasn't wrong about the place. Donner Pass is beautiful in that rugged, almost hostile way. Tall pines, sheer cliffs, wind that cuts through your jacket no matter how good the insulation is, and far up the ridge you can hear trains groaning their way along the rails. Even the abandoned sections echo sometimes, like they're remembering the engines that used to run through them. When we got to the clearing off Boreal Ridge Road, the sun was already dipping behind the granite. The temperature dropped fast. Snowflakes drifted sideways in the wind, swirling the way they always do in the high Sierra. We set up camp near a ring of half-buried stones, left by whoever camped there last winter. It felt normal, cold but normal. The fire caught on the third try. Mason bragged like he'd invented the idea of matches. Leah unwrapped snacks. Jace wandered the perimeter, stomping down the snow and checking the trail leading toward China Wall. I leaned back against my pack, listening to the distant clatter of a freight train on the old line. I've heard that sound 1,000 times in 1,000 places, but up here, it hits different. Maybe it's the altitude. Maybe it's the canyon walls. It always feels like the sound is coming from behind you, even when the tracks are miles away. I remember telling them, Donner Pass gives me the creeps sometimes. Not fear, just that cold feeling at the base of the spine. Everyone laughed like I was joking. We talked for a while, about work, about people we used to know, about the stories connected to this place, because you can't camp near Donner Pass without someone bringing up the old cannibal thing. Mason turned it into a whole performance, swinging his flashlight like a stage prop and whispering dramatic lines about the hungry ones, the usual campfire nonsense. But then Leah paused mid-sentence. She lifted her head like a dog catching a new scent. "Did you hear that?" she asked. We all stopped talking. At first I thought she meant the train. It had faded into the distance by then, but she shook her head. "No, that." She pointed toward the dark line where the hill dropped off. Sounded like metal, hitting metal, like someone tapping a hammer against a rail. Jace shrugged. "Thermal shift. Happens all the time on the old tracks." But Leah didn't look convinced, and neither did I. A few minutes later, Mason wrinkled his nose. "Anyone else smell that? Like musty. Like a cave." He wasn't wrong. The air had a damp mineral smell, the kind that sinks into your clothes. It felt out of place. There weren't any caves near us. Not any marked ones, anyway. I tried to shake it off. Camping trips come with weird noises, strange smells, temperature swings, nothing unusual. Still, when I checked our gear, something bothered me. I always packed 3 flashlights, always. One on my belt, one in my pack, one spare. There were only 2. I emptied the whole pack onto the tarp, checked every pocket, checked Mason's bag because sometimes he borrows gear without asking. No third flashlight. "Maybe you left it in the truck," Mason said. Maybe. But I didn't think so. Snow kept drifting sideways. The fire crackled. The dark thickened between the trees. Back then, I didn't know what any of it meant. Back then, it was just a strange smell, a missing flashlight, and Leah's uneasy stare aimed at the ridgeline. Looking at that night now, all the pieces were already there. I just didn't see the shape they made. Something up here feels wrong in a way I can't explain. The first sign was the howl. It rose from somewhere near China Wall, long, uneven, vibrating through the trees in a way that made my teeth hurt. It didn't sound like a wolf. It didn't sound like anything with lungs. The pitch kept slipping, like someone twisting a radio dial while trying to mimic an animal from memory. Mason sat up so fast he spilled his drink. "What the hell was that?" Jace frowned into the dark. Not a coyote, not a cat either. Leah wrapped her jacket tighter. It didn't sound alive, Before any of us could say more, the fire puffed once and died, not from lack of wood, not from wind. It just snapped out of existence the way a light bulb pops when the filament burns. "That wasn't normal," Mason whispered. I was about to answer when I noticed the air. Still, too still, no wind brushing the pines, no branches creaking. Not even the faint hiss of snow landing on the tarp. It felt like the whole pass had paused mid-breath. I grabbed my flashlight again, switched it on. Dead, same as before. Mason tried his. His beam lit up instantly, strong, white. But the moment he pointed it toward the tree line, another beam flashed back, 40, maybe 50 feet away. A single pale circle of light floating between the trunks. "That one isn't mine," Mason said quietly. Jace stepped forward, hands on his belt like he expected a ranger to step out. "Probably another group. They might need something." I wasn't convinced. The beam didn't move like it was held by a person. It drifted too slow, too smooth, like it was being carried by water currents we couldn't see. "We should check it out," Jace insisted. Leah shook her head. "We should stay here." But Jace was already walking. Mason cursed under his breath. "We can't let him go alone." He looked at me. I looked at the light. Something in my chest tightened, but I nodded. "Stick close, no splitting up." We followed Jace into the trees, boots crunching lightly over the snow. Mason's flashlight cut a straight path through the dark. The strange beam ahead flickered twice, as if reacting, and slid backward between the branches. The trees thinned until we hit a buried stretch of cracked pavement. Old Lincoln Highway. Snow blanketed most of it, but not all. Lewd, dark streaks cut through the powder, like something had been dragged or had dragged itself. "Those aren't boot marks," Mason said. The beam ahead blinked out, then back on, then off again, always at the same slow, deliberate rhythm. Jace sped up. "It's someone signaling." "Jace, slow down." But he didn't. He jogged ahead, turned left at a bend in the old road, and his silhouette disappeared behind a curtain of trees. "Jace?" I called. No answer. We hurried to the turn. It took maybe 20 seconds to reach it, maybe less. The clearing was empty. No Jace, no light, no sound, just the soft, unnatural quiet sliding back around us. "Where'd he go?" Mason whispered. Leah cupped her hands around her mouth. "Jace! Hey! We're right here!" Her voice bounced off the trees, once, twice, then came back wrong. Lower, slower. A fraction of a second late, like someone replaying her voice from an old tape. Mason spun in a circle. "Okay. No, that's not him. That's not—" "I know," I said. "Stay close." Leah grabbed my arm. "Luke, this isn't normal. That echo thing. That's not how sound works. Something's—" Then we heard it. A voice calling from deeper in the trees. "Help! This way!" Jace's voice. Or something trying very, very hard to be his voice. Mason looked at me, desperate. "We have to go. We don't even know if that's—" "Luke, come on!" I hesitated, just for a second. But sometimes that's all it takes. Mason took off toward the sound. Leah followed him. And I, because I couldn't let them vanish too, ran after both of them. The trees opened again faster than I expected. The trail bent sharply downhill, snow thinned, and then we saw it. A cabin, old, dark, sitting crooked on a foundation of warped logs. No smoke, no footprints, no sign of life. Just a dead building sunk halfway into the earth. Leah stopped so abruptly I almost ran into her. "This wasn't on the map, right? I checked every marked shelter." "There's nothing up here." Mason shook his head. "Sheriff Lowell told me there used to be cabins for miners, but that was like decades ago. Most of them collapsed." "This one didn't," I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Everything looked wrong. The angles, the roofline, the way the shadows bled out from underneath it, too dark compared to the sky. The voice called again, closer this time. "Help, please." It sounded like Jace, almost, but the cadence was off. No breath between words, no background sound, nothing but the raw shape of his voice pushed through cold air. Leah looked at me. "Luke, we shouldn't go inside." "I know." "Then what do we—" The flashlight beam, the strange one, flashed again from somewhere behind the cabin. One flicker, two, three, like a signal. Mason whispered, "That's him. It has to be." I swallowed hard. The air felt heavier than before, the way it does right before a storm. Only there was no storm, no wind, nothing. Just that cabin, just that impossible light, just the three of us in the middle of a place that didn't want us there. I stepped forward. "Luke," Mason said, "tell me we're not going in." I stared at the doorway, dark, crooked, open just an inch like someone had left it that way intentionally. "We don't have a choice," I said, "because Jace was gone, because something was luring us inward, because every path we'd followed tonight had led to this exact spot, and because sometimes the only way to make it out alive is to walk straight into the worst idea you've ever had." I pushed the door open. The darkness inside swallowed the beam of Mason's flashlight. We crossed the threshold, and the cabin closed around us like a held breath. The cabin was colder than the snow outside, not cold like winter air, cold like a basement that hasn't been opened in 50 years, cold like something was pulling the heat out of our lungs the second we stepped in. The smell hit next, old wood, wet earth, and something metallic underneath, the kind of smell you get when a place has no business still standing. Mason's flashlight carved a pale path across the room. The beam shook in his hand. The walls were stained a dull brown, warped from moisture. At first I thought the scratches along the boards were from animals, bears, raccoons, anything with claws. Then I looked closer. They weren't claw marks. They were fingernails, long vertical streaks where someone had scraped down the wall over and over until the wood splintered. Dry blood was trapped between the grooves. Leah backed into me. "Oh my God, Luke!" "I see it," I whispered. A wooden table sat tilted in the far corner. Papers were scattered across it, brittle with age, curled at the edges like they'd been heated or burned. Mason reached out, brushing ash aside. Underneath was a black and white photo. 3 men in 1940s Army uniforms stood in front of a tunnel entrance. One of them had a dark smear across his face, like someone had blotted him out deliberately. A fourth figure stood behind them, blurred and wrong, too tall, shoulders hunched. The legs caught the light just right to reveal an angle no human joint could make. "That's not a trick of the camera," Leah whispered. Mason pulled another sheet from the pile. Half of it was burned away, but the remaining lines were readable. Specimen 3. Temperature acclimation. Subject displays extreme limb distortion. He swallowed hard. "Oh, hell no." Before I could say anything, a soft sound drifted up from beneath the cabin. A scrape, a pull, then a slow, deliberate thump. Something was crawling under the floorboards. Mason dropped to one knee, shining his light between the cracks in the wooden planks. "Don't," I started, too late. The beam hit something pale, a hand, too thin, fingers too long, nails cracked and muddy. It snapped upward and grabbed the flashlight so fast, Mason yelped and fell backward, the light wrenching out of his grip. The hand dragged the flashlight into the darkness beneath the cabin. We heard it clatter once, twice, then go silent. "That was our missing one," Leah said under her breath. Before we could move, she stumbled backward, staring past me. "Luke. Window. Now." I turned. Something tall stood outside the cabin, framed in the crooked window. The glass was fogged with cold, but I could see the outline clearly. Shoulders hunched, head tilted too far to the side, and legs bent backward at the knee. It wasn't moving. It was watching. Mason grabbed my arm. "What the hell do we do? What do we do?" I forced myself to breathe. "We find another way out, now." We moved fast, quieter than we thought humans could move. Leah found a door in the back wall, half buried under a collapsed shelf. I shoved the shelf aside and yanked the door open. A ladder led downward into the dark. "Basement?" Mason asked. "No," I said, older. The air rising from below smelled like rust and cold stone, like a tunnel. The kind I hated, the kind where sound dies. But staying in the cabin wasn't an option. I climbed down first. The ladder rattled against stone. My boots hit hard ground. It wasn't a basement, it was a corridor. Old timbers overhead, rusted rails embedded in the floor, walls dripping with water, a half-collapsed mining tunnel. Summit Valley mining site, abandoned after a major collapse in 1983. Leah came down behind me. Mason followed, breathing hard. "What the hell was that thing outside?" he whispered. "I don't know yet," I said. "Just keep moving." We pushed deeper, following the faint slope downward. The tunnel curved left, right, then opened into a wider section supported by thick beams. Something shiny caught my eye beneath a layer of dust. A metal plate. I brushed it off. "Us War Dept, Harlow Ridge Project Archive." Leah read it out loud. "What was the military doing inside a mining tunnel?" "Nothing good," Mason muttered. We kept walking until the tunnel split. A faint noise drifted from the left passage, something like a voice echoing off stone. "Luke!" I froze. Mason grabbed my sleeve. "Did you hear that?" he breathed. The voice came again, closer. "Help! Please!" It was Mason's voice, but Mason was standing right beside me. He let out a shaky exhale. "That's not me. That's not me." Leah shook her head violently. "We need to turn around. Now. This place is—" A shape appeared at the far end of the left tunnel, stumbling, slow, head tilted like the neck couldn't support its own weight. "Jace?" Mason whispered. It looked like Jace. The jacket, the boots, the familiar posture. But the skin was too pale, too stretched, like it hadn't been warmed by a heartbeat in hours. And when it stepped forward, the right leg buckled inward at a wrong angle, not broken, bent, a copy of movement, but not the real thing. "Jace," I said softly. "Stop." The figure raised its head. The eyes were wrong, not glowing, just empty, unfocused, like it didn't understand what they were for. Leah grabbed my hand. "Luke, that's not him. Please. We have to go." The thing twitched, once, like a puppet jerked by the wrong strings. Then it charged. We bolted down the right tunnel. Mason screamed for us to move faster. Leah stumbled, caught herself, pushed on. The air grew colder. The walls narrowed. My chest burned. My legs felt heavy. Every step echoed too loud, bouncing off the stone like the tunnel was mocking us. We burst into Tunnel 7, a wider rail corridor reinforced with concrete. Behind us, something skittered into the entrance. Not footsteps, not running, crawling, fast. Leah screamed, "Don't look back!" I didn't. I aimed Mason's remaining flashlight down the tunnel, sweeping the beam left and right. Old graffiti, broken tools, ice forming on the rails, no exit in sight. Then I saw it. A maintenance access door, half buried behind fallen crates. "Here!" I shouted. We sprinted. Mason yanked the door open. Leah slipped inside first. I grabbed her hand, pulling her through. Mason turned back for 1 second, and something long and pale wrapped around his ankle. He hit the ground hard, flashlight spinning across the floor. He clawed at the concrete, but whatever grabbed him was stronger. It dragged him backward, scraping him over ice, leaving streaks of blood. "Mason!" I lunged, grabbing his wrist. His fingers locked around mine. His eyes were wide, terrified. "Luke, don't let go!" he screamed. But the force yanked him back so violently his grip slid from mine as if someone had peeled our hands apart. He disappeared into the dark. His scream cut off, like someone pressed mute. Leah grabbed my jacket. "Luke, we have to move!" I stood there for 1 second, just one, staring into the tunnel where he vanished. Then I heard it. Breathing, deep, slow, not human. Something pulled itself into the edge of the flashlight's broken beam. The full shape. The one we had only glimpsed outside. Its spine arched under stretched skin. Its arms dragged long, knuckles scraping stone. Its legs bent backward, ready to spring. Its head tilted, studying us with the cold attention of something built, not born. And it stepped forward, silent. Completely silent. I grabbed Leah's hand and ran. We tore down the corridor, slipping on ice, smashing through the narrow passage behind the maintenance door. The tunnel behind us seemed to shrink, crushing the sound out of everything except our breathing. Leah tripped at the bend. I hauled her up. Her flashlight flickered but stayed alive. Then, just as the tunnel widened again, something yanked her backward. She didn't even scream, just a sharp gasp as her body vanished into the dark behind me. "Leah!" I lunged, grabbed air. Nothing else, only darkness breathing. I ran. Not because it was brave, because every instinct in me screamed that if I stayed even 1 second longer, I'd feel those long fingers wrap around my leg. I ran until my lungs tore, until the cold seared my chest, until the tunnel wall blurred into streaks of gray. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not with that thing behind me. Not with the sound of crawling echoing up the rails like a second heartbeat. Not with the mountain closing in. I don't know how long I ran. Time didn't make sense down there. The cold felt thicker, like the air itself had weight. Every breath tasted like dust from a century ago. The tunnel walls narrowed, widened, then narrowed again, like they were breathing with me. I didn't stop until my legs buckled. I dropped to my knees, coughing hard enough to see stars. Silence settled around me, heavy, wet, suffocating. For the first time since the cabin, nothing was chasing me. Or maybe it was just waiting. I shone the dying flashlight along the ground, old rails, rusted bolts, frozen puddles reflecting the beam in broken shards. The place looked less like a mine and more like a tomb carved for something that shouldn't have existed. A few feet away, a metal locker lay half-crushed under a collapsed timber. Papers spilled out in a frozen fan, edges curled from fire damage. Some pages were stuck together with dark stains I didn't want to identify, but one sheet was still readable. I picked it up, hands trembling so badly the paper shook. The top read, Harlow Ridge Project Archive. Subject log, Specimen 3. The rest was worse. Specimen retains partial higher cognition. Reacts strongly to human vocal patterns. Avoidance behavior around direct light. Extreme cold tolerance achieved. Achieved. Like that was the goal. I slid down the wall until I was sitting in the cold gravel, staring at the page. It wasn't a ghost that took Mason. It wasn't some wilderness creature that dragged Leah into the dark. And it wasn't the legend people whispered about Donner Pass. It was something man-made, something engineered, something left behind. My flashlight flickered. I aimed it toward another pile of papers half-trapped under stone. A photograph was wedged between two boards, corners stained with soot. It showed 3 men in 1940s Army uniforms standing outside the mouth of a tunnel. One had his face blurred out, not by damage but by deliberate smudging, like someone had taken ink and wiped him from existence. Behind them, barely visible in the shadows, was a fourth shape, too tall, too thin, legs bent the wrong way, arms hanging like dead weight, the same shape we'd seen outside the cabin, the same shape dragging itself through snow, the same shape breathing behind me in the tunnel. My stomach turned. I whispered to nobody. That wasn't a monster. It was a man. And the tunnel answered, not with words, with something softer, a slow, uneven scrape. I froze, lifted the flashlight. Its beam caught another metal plate on the wall, rusted but readable, U.S. War Dept, Hazardous Research Zone, authorized entry only. Below it, someone had etched a sentence directly into the steel. Don't open the lower shaft. My breath hitched. The lower shaft was behind me, just past a collapsed barricade with chains hanging loose. The gap was small, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Something had been squeezing through it. The rails beyond dipped steeply downward. The darkness got thicker, almost material, the kind of dark that swallows sound. And from inside that dark, Leah's voice called softly, "Luke, help me." I felt every muscle in my body go rigid. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not you." The voice echoed again, perfectly. Same pitch, same tone, same scared tremble she always got when cold. Except it was coming from a place where no human should be. I took one step back, then another. My boot hit something soft. I spun, raising the flashlight. Leah lay in the middle of the tunnel, face down, hair spread across the gravel, jacket torn. For half a second, just half, I thought she was alive. Then her arm bent backward at the elbow, not broken, reversed. I staggered back, nearly dropping the light. "Leah!" My voice cracked. She pushed one hand into the gravel, trying to rise. The hand shook, twitched, moved with jerks instead of smooth motion. Her head lifted slightly, but her neck wasn't bending. It was more like something inside was pulling the head by the jaw. When she turned toward me, her face stayed hidden. The wrong side of her head was facing upward. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. The shadow stretched across the floor behind her, long, hunched, tilting at that same impossible angle. It grew taller as it came forward, slow and deliberate, like it was studying my reactions. The thing stepped into the edge of the light. Its spine rippled beneath thin skin. Its ribs shifted with each breath. Its legs bent backward as if that was the natural way it walked. And its head hung low, tilted 45 degrees, like it was examining a strange object, me. It studied me, watched my fear, measured it, not mindlessly hungry, not enraged, curious. Leah, or whatever was wearing Leah, stumbled toward me. The movements were wrong, disassembled, learned from observation instead of muscle memory. I backed up until my shoulders hit the stone wall. My voice came out small. "Please, don't." The creature behind her twitched, not angrily. Almost reacting, like it understood tone more than words. The burned report flashed in my mind. Specimen retains partial higher cognition, reacts strongly to human vocal patterns. It could think, not like us, but enough to mimic, enough to follow, enough to bait us with voices we trusted, enough to choose which shape to wear. My throat tightened. This wasn't a force of nature. It wasn't cursed. It wasn't from folklore or ghosts or the wilderness. It was ours. A human being twisted into something the cold could no longer kill. Something made for these tunnels. Something abandoned. I felt myself whisper before I even realized the words were forming. It wasn't born evil. It was built, then abandoned. The tunnel seemed to inhale. Leah's copy jerked once, almost like approval, then slumped forward, knees folding the wrong way. The larger creature stepped over her body, studying me, head still tilted like it was listening for a sound I couldn't hear. It moved closer. I pressed myself against the wall hard enough to feel stone dig into my spine. The beam of the flashlight shook uncontrollably in my hand. When it hit the creature's face, if you could call it a face, the pupils contracted like an animal's, sharp, instant, a reflex. It hated light, but it tolerated mine. Why? Something clicked in my head, slow but certain. It wasn't hunting us. It had never been hunting us. It had been guiding us, driving us, steering us back toward these tunnels like sheep into a chute, because this was home, its cage, its origin. Leah was bait, Mason was bait, Jace, if he ever made it down here, was bait, and I was the one it wanted to keep. Every step we'd taken since the fire went out, every weird sound, every borrowed voice, every flash of light had pushed us here, into the dark, into the cold, into the tunnels it knew better than anything else in the world. I swallowed, breath shaking. My voice came out a whisper. It wasn't hunting us. It was trying to bring us back underground. The creature lifted its head slightly, and for the first time, I realized it understood me. I woke up to white ceiling tiles and the smell of disinfectant. For a long time, I couldn't move. I wasn't tied down. My body just refused to listen. Everything felt heavy, cold, like the mountain had followed me inside and settled under my skin. A nurse said I'd been found lying on the shoulder of Old Lincoln Highway, half buried in snow. Severe dehydration, mild frostbite, early-stage hypothermia. They kept repeating that I was lucky. Lucky. I asked about Mason, Jace, Leah. They didn't answer. Later that day, Sheriff Raymond Lowell came in, hat still on, snow melting off his coat. He stood at the foot of my bed like he didn't want to get too close. "Son," he said quietly, "there hasn't been a cabin up there in 40 years. I opened my mouth to argue, but he raised a hand. "I know what you think you saw. I'm not here to debate it. Folks get turned around in those woods. People hear things. Cold does strange stuff to the mind." He looked at the floor before finishing. "Your friends, we're still searching, but conditions make it unlikely." Unlikely, not impossible, just unlikely. I asked about the tunnels, the old mining site, the markings. He stiffened immediately. "That area's unstable, closed off for decades. You shouldn't have been anywhere near it." Then he left. No more questions, no more explanations, just a closed door and a long silence. When they discharged me 2 days later, they returned a small plastic bag with my belongings, wallet, gloves, broken watch, and a flashlight. But it wasn't mine. Wrong brand, wrong grip, wrong scratches along the casing, thin, deep like it had been dragged across stone over and over. I told the nurse it wasn't part of my gear. She shrugged. "It was in your jacket pocket when the rescue team found you." I didn't argue. I just put it in my duffel and went home. That night I placed the bag on the floor of my motel room and sat on the bed, staring at the flashlight through the plastic. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to. Around 2 a.m., something woke me. A soft click. The flashlight was on. Its beam pointed at the ceiling, shaking in tiny rhythmic pulses, like fingers tightening around it. I stepped closer, heart pounding, and the light flickered once before going dark again. I stood there for a long time, waiting for something, anything. When I finally turned off the motel lamp, the room fell into an instant, unnatural quiet. No cars outside, no wind, no humming from the heater. Just the faint sound of something moving across the carpet, slow, deliberate, dragging itself the way I saw in the snow. And on quiet nights, I hear something moving in the hallway, not walking, crawling, and I know it hasn't forgotten me.